Chapter 25. A Bird, a Scorpion, and a Baby. Cass awoke in darkness, curled up in a ball and aching all over. She fought the urge to panic. Where was she? Had she been kidnapped? In an accident, reflexively she felt her wrist to see if she had been tied up, or had any injuries. No, she was fine. She sat up, hid her head. Oh, the crate. She was still in the crate. She could hear Max Ernest and Yoji snoring, otherwise it was strangely quiet. The low hum they had heard for hours and hours was gone. The crate was no longer moving. Wherever they were sitting still. She clicked her phone on. She was just able to see the time before the battery gave out. 6:30 a.m. in the morning. They'd slept all night. There was no way to know how far they'd traveled, or for all she knew, they could have journeyed halfway around the world. Or on the other hand, they could be less than a mile from the Natural History Museum. Afraid to make any noise, she felt around for Max Ernest and Yoji. Then awakened them by shaking a leg and an arm, respectively. Huh? Where are... Shh, she hissed. Don't say anything. They were groggy and sore, but there was no need to debate next steps. They all wanted to get out as soon as they could. The operation was a little more difficult than they had anticipated. The crate was not meant to carry live human passengers, only dead feline ones, and therefore the door was not designed to be opened from the inside. Using Cass's flashlight and a screwdriver and a toothpick, they had to pick the lock from the back, where it was often easier than picking the lock from the front. But it takes some getting used to. It's like reading upside down or trying somebody else's shoes. I assume you have plenty of experience picking locks the usual way, but for the record, I don't condone reading your best friend's sister's diary, only your own sister's diary. Eventually, however, the spring and lever gave way and the door swung open and the crate was flooded with light. Temporarily blinded, our friends held their breath, hoping there was no unfriendly forces waiting outside, whether museum workers or Midnight Sun members. But nobody attacked them, nobody yelled at them or expressed shock in seeing them. There was no sound or movement of any kind. Where the heck are we? Asked Yoji when his eyes started to adjust. They peered out the door in astonishment. The crate was sitting inside what appeared to be the stone ruins of an ancient Egyptian temple. On either side there were walls covered entirely with hieroglyphs, so well preserved that they still showed the color of the ritual paint. Gods and pharaohs, slaves and children, plants and animals, and the whole botany of Egyptian life was depicted. Directly in front of where the crate sat was a row of thick decorative columns that ended in capital design to look like the lotus flowers. Beyond the temple, the desert stretched out in all directions, sea of soft, rippling sand dunes. A perfect yellow sun hovered above the sky, with the same brilliant blue as the lapis lazuli of the Ring of Thoth. Wispy white clouds slowly floated by, almost disappearing as a bird burst through them and flew off towards the horizon. Cass blinked. The scene reminded her so much of her dream that she wasn't quite sure she was awake. Are we where I think we are? Asked Yoji. Well, we've been in a crate long enough, said Cass. I mean, how long does it take to fly to Egypt? I don't know. There's something very weird about this, said Max Ernest. This seems like a pretty big temple for a little cat mummy. You would think they just pull him in the museum somewhere, even in Egypt. Maybe this is a tourist site. There's like one of those little museums connected to the ruins, and there's just sorting the crates here until they're unloaded. It suggested Yoji. Maybe, said Max Ernest. Something about this doesn't make sense, though. Come on, let's get out before somebody sees us, said Cass. Still staring at the new surroundings, the three tired stowaways stepped out of the crate onto the stone floor of the temple that stretched their wobbly legs. Before going any further, Yoji reached back into the crate and carefully removed his sunglasses from the face of the cat mummy. Bye, little guy. It's been real. He closed the door with more force than he meant to, and the bang echoed the temple. They froze for a moment, waiting for the sound of an Egyptian soldier. But nobody came running. They still appeared to be alone. Max Ernest looked out at the vast desert vista. Staking through the sand was a twisting line of green, and peeking through the vegetation was a sparkling river. "Is that the Nile?" he asked. "Let's go see," said Yoji, heading down the temple steps. "Maybe we can catch a boat out of here. If we're where we think we are, it would take us a seriously long time to get home by boat," said Max Ernest. "First we'd have to travel up the Nile, then across the Mediterranean Sea." "You have a better idea?" asked Yoji. Cass, overwhelmed by a sense of deja vu, stopped halfway down the temple steps. "Isn't that the same bird we saw a moment ago?" she asked, scratching her head. "What do you mean? How can you tell from here?" asked Max Ernest. "I can't, never mind." Cass sensed a dreamlike unreality intensified as she stepped out of the sand, each grain glittering in the sand like a tiny pebble of gold. She grabbed a fistful and let it fall from her hand like the sand in the hourglass. It was her dream again. "Watch out," cried Yoji. A large scorpion was scurrying across the sand towards them. They jumped back onto the temple steps, then veered away before reaching them. "Wow, that thing is huge. It's like a dog," said Yoji, watching it go. "And so shiny, it almost looks like it's made out of metal." Tentatively, they stepped back onto the sand. The river had looked to be less than a quarter of the mile away, and it was much closer than they, perhaps 30 feet. Indeed, as they walked towards it, they thought their eyes were playing tricks on them. Palm trees from a distance had appeared to be 20 feet high, now seemed hardly taller than they were. When they were only a few feet away from the river, they looked down into the rushes. "No boats," said Max Ernest. "Time to make a new plan." "What's that?" asked Cass, cocking her head to one side. "What?" "Wah!" came crying from the river. "Is that a baby?" asked Max Ernest, who knew that sound only too well. Indeed, it was a baby, swaddled in linen and lying in a basket. It looked as if it had been floated down the river and became lodged in a papyrus plant along the shore. Crying at the top of its little lungs, the baby waves its arms and legs in the air. Cass eyed the baby with concern. Did somebody just leave it there? "Does anybody else remember the story about the baby in the Nile?" asked Yoji. The others looked blank. The baby Moses, sent down the river to be saved from being killed by the Pharaoh's soldiers. Raised by an Egyptian princess. Gets the 10 Commandments. Neither of you two smarties ever heard of the Bible?" "Sure, I've heard of it," said Cass defensively. "So what are you saying? We got transported back to biblical times, and that's him right there?" asked Max Ernest. "I'm not saying anything. This whole thing is crazy. I don't care who it is. We can't just leave him like that," said Cass, stricken. "We have to do something." She started running towards the river. Max Ernest shook his head. "Hold on. It's not real." "What do you mean?" said Cass, slowing. "Babies don't move like that. Trust me, I've spent the last year watching every move a baby makes, and the baby that little doesn't have much motor coordination. And even if he did, the movements wouldn't repeat over and over. There would have to be a little variety. And then he would get tired. How about that? I mean, babies are human beings, sort of." "You're saying it's a fake baby?" asked Cass, "like a mechanical doll?" "Just like the plant," said Yoji as he reached the river. He waved the papyrus plant around. "It was plastic." "In the sky," said Max Ernest, pointing to the spot in the cloud that hid a loudspeaker. "The sky is two painted backdrops." Everything around them was fake, and it was as if they were walking on a giant stage set. Only the water was real, and when they looked more closely at the river, they could see the bottom was not sand but scuro. "So where are we then?" asked Cass. "Just where we thought we were going," said Max Ernest. He nodded back to the temple. From the angle, they could see one side of it was missing, and was a virtual stage set. Above the temple, neon lights blinked, unwrapped real mummies. Clearly, this was the new home of the mummy exhibit. In the middle of the sky was a sign, "Casino. Las Vegas. Sick." Yoji nodded. Tired and hungry, they trudged through the sand towards the casino door, like refugees wandering the desert. Given their exhausted state, it was no wonder they didn't notice the rustling of the artificial glass. Had their invisible stalker decided to pounce, he would have had the advantage of surprise. He decided to let them pass. Here it would be too easy, he thought. This was Vegas. He wanted to gamble.